You are a legal expert, so let me go to you about the first question. The one who has been accused of committing the crime, Mr. Christensen,
right,
has asked his lawyer to plead not guilty. And now the body of Ms. Zhang has not been found, even though it is believed that she passed away. But mix all of these things together, how long will the legal process be?
You know, the legal process is a long and slow one in the United States, and they were talking earlier that the next hearing is going to be in August, and then the trial would be set for September. And trials sometimes go on very long period of time, and also there might be an extension of time for whatever reason. So, I mean, the one thing that's definitely different between the Chinese legal process, especially in criminal matters, and in American common law matters, is the length of time of these trials. Justice moves really slow.
Right, and the other point is the body has not been found.
Right.
The body which is believed by the public that Ms. Zhang had passed away. So if the body cannot be found and located, would that add further complication legally?
Sure. I mean, you know, what they call it, it's the habeas corpus or the corpus delicti. You've got to actually have the body, and there's always this reasonable doubt. Maybe she'll come walking in, and these things have happened in China as well. I mean,
in the United States, it's not guilty until proved.
Right. Supposedly. I mean, but that's the concept. I mean, not guilty. The presumption is on innocence. I think it's very difficult these days with 24-hour media cycles to be considered innocent. And even when we're talking about this gentleman, it's not necessarily the right way to do it. But I understand that the evidence or the information that we have is one thing. What the investigators have, we don't know exactly.
Professor Chambers, of course, two things I want to ask you. First of all, you are, as a media expert, observing this, I'm sure, very closely, because many of your students are also coming originally from China. They would talk about and debate about this in your class and elsewhere. What do you make of the whole case from the media's coverage and also from the differences, it seems, the intensity it generated both here in China and the United States?
Well, the more intense coverage, of course, in a country like the United States, would be in Illinois, because some coverage of crimes tends to be very hyper-local. However, this has spilled into the national media in some regard. Unfortunately, it seems to spill into the national media when the angle of Chinese students comes into play. National media often ties it to immigration and problems in higher education, which really is kind of extraneous. But the best news coverage has been the local coverage in the state of Illinois from some of the major downstate, where the university is, and upstate in Chicago news outlets covering it very well. So that's the problem, and it hasn't really hit on a national level. And again, that's probably because they like to tie it into extraneous issues like immigration, or maybe there are too many students, Chinese students in America, that kind of a thing.
Professor Chambers,
locally, though, the coverage has been very good.
Yeah, Professor Chambers, I want to follow up on you, because we all know today the news is O.J. Simpson case, which has been the TV drama in the United States for a decade almost, once again revived. And he tried to look for parole at this point. But the question really is, linking to what we're discussing today, more media intensity and attention, would it help to resolve the case? Would it help to bring more justice and attention to this case, and as a result, be able to find a solution? Professor Chambers.
Yes, yes, the attention will be positive. It will help parents in China prepare their children, whether they're going into high school or college or even graduate school, better. The only underside to that would be causing a sense of maybe hysteria and causing people to not want their children to come to the United States or study abroad anywhere. But I think the positives outweigh the negatives there, because it will make people more vigilant, it will have people do more research, and it will have people maybe do more research into how things are in the United States. And a lot of Chinese students were killed in very intimate situations where maybe, you know, if you go into a bad neighborhood, you might have a bad feeling, but you don't think somebody's going to hit you from behind in the car and then murder you. But that does happen in the United States. So it might help also the students develop almost this sixth sense about, you know, you can be hurt in situations in the United States where you think you're totally safe. That's what usually happens.
Yeah. When you talk about the dangers, there are, according to some media reports, three main risks being summarized toward the security of Chinese overseas students. One is the condition of local community security. The second is that many Chinese students lack safety awareness and safety precautions. Many of them are the only child of the family. Think about the intense care they will get from their parents and grandparents. And third is the increasingly younger age of overseas students from China to very different kinds of countries around the world. Ms. Wang, of course, you're an education expert here. So do you worry about these causes for Chinese students overseas for their safety issues? Do they know how to take care of themselves compared to their peers elsewhere in the world? Ms. Wang?
I think we can look at the Zhang Yingying, what happened to her from two perspectives. The first is obviously this has shown that Chinese students might potentially have less education or experiences in dealing with such situations. And the another side of the coin is that at the cost of what happened to Zhang Yingying, this alerted Chinese students to get better preparedness for receiving education abroad. For example, how to deal with different people in different situations and stay away from the danger, and also.
But they have to know where the danger is. They have to know what the danger is about. I mean, sometimes this is a cross-cultural issue. I mean, you listen to some people's talk, and some in the same culture could figure out the connotation of it. And if you're coming from a different culture, it's probably hard to figure it out. And secondly, curiosity of young people. It's just natural. We are all curious.
Sure.
But to what extent can you explore it? And to what extent can you explore it with strangers? That's also another thing. And thirdly, of course, is this very different environment. In China, relatively speaking, crime rate is really low compared to some of the other countries, let's just say also in the United States as well. So all of this, adding it up, how much complexity is it really adding to the Chinese educational system to tell the students and how to prepare the students for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the cultural issue is something also to consider as well. I mean, that there's a lot of confusion. For example, a couple of years ago, there was a case in Los Angeles where there were some Chinese high school students that were overseas that had actually abducted another Chinese student. It was just sort of a rivalry among girls. But that was also considered to be kidnapping, and then the father came over and tried to solve the case and tried to settle with the so-called victims, and that was considered maybe not the right thing to do under American law. And so I think that there's a lot of confusion as to who one can lean on or talk to in order to identify what are you supposed to be doing. And the world's changing, so it's a different place now.
That's right. This is a great point, Ms. Wang. You got confusion also for the students as well, because they are in two different cultures, two very different legal systems as well, two very different approaches as to how to talk to people, get to know people, deal with people, interact with them. So, Ms. Wang, these complications, is this the new lessons or new experiences for the Chinese students abroad?
I think overall, this becomes more and more issue for overseas students, especially because more and more students going abroad for study, and there is less number of the courses or prepared such kind of orientation courses in our undergraduate education or in high school education, such as this kind of risk watch.
It's really about the courses, I wonder, Professor Chambers. I mean, how many courses would you have for a student, right? You can't have the safety courses, how to deal with stranger courses, but it's rather a life knowledge people get to have through growing up process. Many wonder, Ms. Wang, and then Professor Chambers. Ms. Wang first.
It is.
You're right.
It is a lot. It is a.
People learn in the school and out of the school, as long as they are aware of the importance, and they can learn from communicating with people and learning from the people.
Yeah.
As long as they realize the importance of this kind of cross-cultural communication, and also how to communicate with people. And
right. Professor Chambers, three things. One is.
Well, it is. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
This is a new experience for China because the first time China sends so many students abroad, even such a young age. Secondly, Cross-cultural is very new for the Chinese as well. Thirdly, this is several generations of the only child. This is a rare phenomenon in the world. Nobody knows how to deal with it. So all of these combined, quite an interesting and complicated, I would say, factors.
Oh, it's very complicated, especially when you're taking all those three factors and putting these children in, say, a large state university in, say, a rural area, like Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, is basically a rural area, and I think some parents and the children that get there seem to think, oh, I'm safe, everything is fine because I'm not in a big city, I'm not around certain neighborhoods. When you look at the injuries, the kidnappings, the murders, the sexual assaults on Chinese students in the United States and even in other countries abroad, they have been in these kind of small communities that have been bubbles, and I think that lulls parents and lulls the students into a false sense of security because they think, well, I'm not in a big city, I'm okay. That's not true. So I think the research has to be done in these communities to see where these dangers are. And you saw this in Illinois, where this is the typical danger of a stranger who seems okay, luring somebody in, and harm comes to that person. Right. And so, you know, I think that awareness needs to be emphasized in China, and the danger of big cities needs to be de-emphasized, and the danger that exists in some of these small communities needs to be emphasized.
Mr. Lehman, one factor we really need to mention here as well, that is the world is changing fast, internet bringing in a lot of great information, but at the same time, there are also underground websites that are teaching so-called some like-minded people with terrible crime possibilities, and this possibly is one of those cases. So from the legal perspective, how can we preempt this thing before it happens?
I mean, this is a very interesting question. I mean, because we have, of course, the First Amendment, which is the freedom of speech, and then in order to have whether that's going to be infringing on someone else's safety. This is we're talking about the fetish website that this gentleman is alleged to have seen, and abduction as well. So, I mean, there's a cutoff point about what's freedom of speech and what's endangering other people, and this is the kind of question that China wrestles with quite a bit with regards to what's good or bad for the public. And it seems that the scope is wider, you know, and what is not as wide, I think, in the United States with censoring these kind of sites, but that might be an alternative.